So hey everybody, it's the One Podcast. This is the kind of latest episode here with Kyle Levy from Unihop. Very interesting kind of podcast today. We're going to go into kind of his background, his entrepreneurial, journey over the last couple of years, and everything that he's done. It's going to be pretty interesting. We'll focus particularly on like higher ed and ed tech, because that's an area I think that we're both familiar with, that I've kind of worked with as well. We're also going to get into kind of two-sided marketplaces, how early stage entrepreneurs can start, and various other things. But Kyle, do you want to kind of give a quick intro to our audience here, and then we can kind of dive into how you started?
Sure. So to keep it simple, Unihop makes delivery easy for any business, specifically small businesses. We work with small businesses very closely to understand their operations, to find ways where different types of delivery can be applicable, and then work with them to implement it, to make sort of that transition super easy.
Cool. And so just to give the audience some context, kind of how did you start Unihop? And it wasn't always right with the businesses. So maybe you can kind of give people an idea of like what was your initial conception of the company?
Sure. So we started like 90% of college startups, where we were going to create a platform where people could find other people to do services for them. That idea never got launched. It started off as an idea of like, how do we fight this chicken versus egg issue? Are there enough people who want to grocery shop, cut people's hair, do their laundry, etc.? Realize that there wasn't. There's also, sort of this whole situation where, when do people really need that stuff done? Typically during finals. And when finals exams are going on, how do you have the workforce to do it when everyone is in that same situation? So that idea never got launched. It was pivoted into a short-term fixer, which was, at my university, getting packages was a pain in the butt. Your package would be sent to a mail center. You wouldn't see that for a couple of days. So our solution: receive packages for students, then deliver it to them same day, typically 20 minutes after it was delivered. So you could get your stuff a lot quicker, and you wouldn't have to risk losing your packages or having them get stolen or misdelivered. So that was really good. Continued with that.
Kyle, just a quick dive in there. So that was it was an issue that your peers had, right? That probably you had. Did it immediately occur to you that this is like a university specific issue, like for students, or were you thinking of it more in terms of just like for the broader populace, like, sometimes getting packages?
So I would say at first it was just, my specific university. Then looking at it a little bit larger, it started to be more of a community issue, where if you lived in an apartment building, if you lived in a, gated community, if you lived in a college campus, it sort of all was relevant. But as we started seeing packages come in, we started realizing that a lot of people are ordering stuff, one, that could be purchased locally, or two, they were purchasing the same things. So then, sort of identifying, all right, well, why are we receiving packages and then delivering them for a fixed fee when we can start, delivering stuff from stores, or even stockpiling some of these items and, delivering them ourselves. So the shortest iteration right after just receiving packages was I would keep, 40 cases of water in my dorm at a time. And because people would order water so much, we would say, you know what? Let's just deliver this water. So we charged $15 a case of water. I think we got like a wholesale price of like $3. So we were making, $12 a case of water. And then it expanded into damp rid. Damp rid wasn't super popular, but typically you could upsell that with a case of water. I could use another damp rid around the same time. They last about, 30 or so days. Case of water would last 30 or so days. So you would just re-up together. We never even, did any discounts on that. It was, you're paying full price. There's no bundle deal. And then that expanded into, we don't want to be a GoPuff. We don't want to, selectively purchase items and deliver them really fast. Because at the
You
end
were
of the day,
aware of GoPuff when you kind
say that
of
again?
were you were aware of GoPuff when you were like conceiving of things and actively
Right,
kind of trying to
right.
not
And
compete.
and the GoPuff model is tricky, because unlike an Instacart where you can order anything, or supposedly anything from a grocery store, GoPuff was very limited. They would get it to you fast, but it wouldn't necessarily be what you want. You don't really get to choose which flavor Gatorade. They give you three. So that problem sort of evolved, and said, you know what? Well, there are things people want that you can't get delivered. Instacart's not delivering Lululemon. So let's start delivering Lululemon. Let's start delivering from stores that everybody wants that you can't get anywhere else. So then, that became a big thing, delivering Lululemon. Even Best Buy, people weren't really aware that you could get delivery, or that their delivery that existed was kind of crappy. It was like you had to order by like 4 p.m. and then you get it, in 3 hours. So we were able to offer a very, consistent model of delivery, very tailored to students, where, you get out of class, you say you want your delivery at 5 o'clock. Our on time rate was like, we would be there within 20 seconds of your requested time. It was like very, very managed.
How did you
And
get
that's
into logistics? How did you kind of manage troubleshoot that type of logistics?
you can either have a lot of people or few people doing really well, and that's the position I went. I
Right.
had really, really, really reliable people, doing really, really controlled routes. And if things were late, they would say, you know what, I'll be right back. They go to the person who's on time, go right back to the person who's late. Does that work on a big scale? Absolutely not. Did it work on a small scale? Surprisingly, yes. I think we had one late delivery, and it was the item spilled or something. So we had to, get a new one. But yeah, it's that was a lot of control, and that's something that you always want starting off, is control. But it's certainly not something that scales.
Got it. And just in case people are unaware, so you had people, just to break down the business, right? So you had students presumably doing the deliveries, and they were, how was that kind of structured, like from a labor, like two-sided kind of marketplace perspective? How did you set up that
So
type?
I would say it wasn't, and to be totally truthful, it wasn't so much of a two-sided marketplace, in the sense that, our drivers weren't freelance like Uber. It was a lot of my friends who were just willing to do it, or it was myself. Um,
Together sort
so so I sort of knew. It was like, all right, what are you doing, tomorrow? And they're like, oh, between 4 and 8, I'm available. Cool. Do your homework in my office. And then can you help me out? And he was like, sure. So it was a lot of that, and there was a lot of just, friends helping out where they can. If they can't help out, it was me. Um, and to say it was fun, no, it wasn't necessarily fun. There were some challenging days to get through. Valentine's Day was tough. But other days were more manageable, and you can sort of, do what you can. Um, but I would say the real next pivot came, from identifying, well, hey, who are we delivering from? We started getting a lot of orders from parents who were ordering things for their kid's birthday. And every parent wanted to get something local. They'd say, what's a good local bakery? What's a good local flower shop? So we started looking for those local places, and we started doing deliveries from there. And then these small businesses would say to us, hey, can you do deliveries for me? I really need help. Or, my delivery guy's off next Tuesday. And we said, yeah, of course we can do that. Here's our pricing. And we came up with pricing really quickly. And it worked. And then the focus came of, do we want to keep delivering to people? Our volume now is significantly heavier doing delivery for businesses. What's the point of continuing delivering for people, our customers? So that was the next real pivot of, let's just cut out B2C and go directly to B2B2C. And how can we scale this quickly? We started working with third parties, and now we're delivering in all 50 states. We really can deliver in 3 different continents, but we're focusing right now on US.
Cool. Cool. So Kyle, I want to get into that pivot a little bit more and sort of, how just growing in the business. But even before we get into that, like if we could just go back. So were you, when you kind of started this company, I presume, a few years ago now, what was the kind of, I guess, were you thinking about like being an entrepreneur? Was it something that was sparked by like a, university pitch contest? Were you looking at it as like a side hustle, like to make some extra income? Like, how were you personally speaking, right? Because, I think, like, how were you kind of looking at it? Like, how did you come into it and just say, hey, I'm going to go for this? This is a problem that people have.
It's a great question. Never really thought about that. I personally hate the word entrepreneurship or
Yeah.
entrepreneur because it makes it seem like it's a job title you can just do. I think
Right.
it's more of something
Widely,
that
widely
I think
mis.
I think it's more of something you kind of fall into. I've always been someone who loves to understand why. I used to, break apart vacuum cleaners and figure out how they were working and then rebuild them in a way that I thought was cooler or more effective. I've always been someone who likes to break and build. So the whole situation started. I was what's it called? I got food sickness, and I was throwing up in my bed. Was thinking to myself, I really need my laundry done. I really need my clothes clean. I need new groceries. I have a package I need picked up. Ironically, I really need I really need someone who can do this. Instacart existed. There were other laundry companies that existed, but they all had their own little quirks to it. One of them they would take 4 hours to do. One of them, laundry was once a week, and you had to have it in by a certain time. So there were all these little
Yeah.
rules to it, but it was all delivery, and it was really frustrating because oh well, today's Sunday, I can't have my laundry done because they don't collect until Wednesday, or it's already past 7 o'clock, and if I want groceries
Yeah.
delivered, the earliest time will be tomorrow at 8 a.m. And none of it was really built around the customer. It was all whatever works best for the business. Um,
Yeah.
so the first step was, I want to fix this. There's tons of students who are not sick who would love for me to pay them. Can I have someone do something for me? Can I have someone, take out my trash? Can I have someone do this and that? So that was really how it started. But going back to your question more of, how did I fall into this? Do I want to be an entrepreneur? I would say it was more of I really wanted this problem to go away. I wanted to fix it for myself. I think every entrepreneur's mindset is one day I want to be able to use this service and not have to run it myself, and I'd love to be able to benefit from it. And that was my mindset of I would love, in a year's time to be able to go on my phone, order something and have it delivered to me the way I want it. So I
Awesome.
was I was, really building a product not just for me but for my community. And it sort of snowballed from there.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like the whole thing you bring up with universities. Like, I remember, like maybe the only job I have ever had for like a day, I was delivering something, just delivering
Yeah.
laundry or something. When I was like a freshman at Penn, it's like it seems like universities are kind of like their own economy, or sort of society where like the time management stuff is like very important, but you're in this captive environment. So I guess, do you like, with coming back to your kind of philosophy of like, you kind of fall into entrepreneurship or whatever you want to call it, do you sort of, and then in mind with your pivot of the business, do you kind of regret starting the company in college in that captive environment where your thoughts are kind of like all centered around, hey, I'm going to deliver, you know what I'm saying, like those problems
Right.
that you have, or something where you're like, oh, this was like a great way for me to kind of get my beak wet in a business without like too much.
100%. I think 100%. I think college, if you break it down, is really 4 years to try something. Because, let's say you fail, worst case is you graduated from college.
Yeah.
Best case is you graduated with a pretty awesome company. So I would, absolutely say I do not regret it at all. Were there things that I wish I did better or realizations that I wish I made sooner? Yes. But I think part of me not realizing them as soon and then seeing how drastic they were was sort of a training of mentality of, hey, you need to be more aware of these big changes and what they can be. Don't get so, stuck in like, this is working, it's going to keep working, but is it really going to
Sure.
work and scale? And I think that was one of the most frustrating things. If, you work so hard for 3, 4 years, and then you look and say, well, if I had made this change, a year earlier, my company would be this big. Versus if I had, what I did and it took me 2 years to realize it, well, that kind of shoots me in the foot. But to say that you can predict that and to say, oh, well, next time it would have been different, you never know. The world's constantly changing. When is a product good fit? When is the product just, it's not the right time? So to say I could have predicted it better, no, I think everything I did was, you know, the best it could have been or as good as it could have been.
Got it. Well, I mean, I'll even kind of switch that question up a little bit because I get how you're kind of framing it there. But how do you think it would have been different if you didn't, you know what I'm saying? If you were starting a company not in college, like, how do you think that, do
Oh,
you think?
okay. So one big piece is you have a community. So you're starting a project in a community, and there's immediately people who are there to help. They're interested in what you're doing. They're interested in just following along. I had a lot of customers who were people in my classes who I never talked to. And then I'd
Okay.
do a delivery to them, and I was like, "Hey, you're in my, class." And they're like, "Yeah, what is my mom did this. I don't even know what this is." So it was a great way of connecting with people, and just finding, common interests, or even talking to them and say, "Hey, what's something else that's difficult in your life?" And saying, "Oh, you want medicine picked up? That's easy. We can do that." So just finding, when you're in such a small community, you get feedback, and you sort of get everything you get running a company in the real world, but 20 times faster. It's like starting a company in New York. It's like companies grow super fast in New York because there's so many people, there's so much going on, and it's all in such a tight little community. So I would say that that was I would recommend it, starting a company in college. If you're someone who wants to start a company at some point, start it in college, or do something in college, because you have such a great
Excellent.
opportunity to just try, and there's tons of resources to benefit.
Cool. So okay, so let's get back into kind of the depth of that pivot. So, you're starting the business. How are you getting the word out and kind of marketing? Are you doing like kind of guerrilla marketing, flyering? Like, school number one, like, walk me through like how you're getting customers.
So 100% started by parent Facebook groups. I would go in Facebook groups. At first, I had my own account, and I would advertise it like very hands off, like, "Hey, I'm a student. I want to help. I know here's a pain point. Let me help you." And that was a huge boost. And then the admins of the parent group, got their big egos got in the way, and they're like, "No, this is our group. You talk about what I want." So they blocked me. And then I had to create fake parent groups, and that or fake parent accounts, and then I would advertise it more and say, "Oh, Unihop helped my son today. Unihop helped my daughter today," and that was also another big boost. And then they banned those accounts. They banned real parents' accounts because they couldn't determine who was real and who wasn't. And then they banned the word Unihop. So then I was like, huh, okay, now what? So then a new parent group was created, not by me, not facilitated by me, that was pro Unihop, and you were allowed to talk about Unihop as much as you wanted. It wasn't as good as the main one because that's where all the parents go to. But then I was like, you know what? This can't be a Kyle Markets in the Facebook group company. How else do we do it? So then we started, partnering with different clubs. We started doing flyers. I got in a ton of trouble with my university for putting up flyers. I won't talk too much about that, but follow the rules that are forced and evade the rules that are not enforced is my quick little recommendation there. But we did the flyers where we could. We did table events where we were allowed, and sort of just snowballed from there.
Got it. Did you do any, I mean, on top of that, I guess, so all word of mouth type stuff, like referral kind of like promos in between people, like referral stuff,
Yeah,
like any good strategies there that people can kind of take?
it's tricky with referrals because you don't want to create like a diluted referral market where, you say use my code and get $10. Now everyone's doing it, and now your company is known as the referral company. Like, oh, use it for a couple minutes, make me money, and then never touch
Yeah.
it again. So that was something I was never a big fan of. I did more referrals of like delayed stage where it's something like, you know, share it with your friend, and when they shop on their first delivery, you get a free delivery, and on their second one, it was really complicated, and I didn't love it. And then we did points where like every delivery you get 5 points, and every 20 points you get a free delivery, things like that. But another big thing with referrals is it's typically something that people are trying to get savings from, and our customers weren't really trying to get savings. They were so
Really?
frustrated with the problems were having with other companies doing delivery that they were, in lack of a better word, they were a little desperate. They were okay with paying a premium. They were okay with, you know, very big tips, because they needed a solution so badly. So I never really had to do referrals too much. We did have some club stuff where it's like if you get your club members to do it, we'll donate, a couple $100 to your charity. But I would say referrals wasn't too much of a big focus. It was more of keeping the clients happy that were using it, and making sure that new clients were understanding of the difference of Unihop. We're not a DoorDash, we're not an Uber Eats. Don't come to us for a burrito delivery. Our pricing is not going to make sense. Our service level is not going to make sense. And even now, like I have some parents who'll reach out to me. They're like, "Hey, Kyle, can you deliver like a burrito or um, like sushi to my son?" And I was like, "No, like that was never what we were about." Even now, when they reach out to me, they're reaching out to my personal number, because that was the relationship I had. It was, you had my number, you knew you were going to get a good service. But yeah, it was marketing was tough. It was certainly tough.
So now, at what point are you considering expanding? Like, how far into it are you? Like, what kind of customer metrics are you thinking? Okay, now we can go to the next school. And how do you kind of approach that as well?
It was not so much a metric, it was more of our our operations solid? Can I expand this operation style to another university? Is it even testable? How much will it cost to expand it? Because at first, expansion looked very expensive. We have to have a facility at every place. We have to, essentially have full-time delivery people, vehicles, insurance, and it was really complicated. Um,
Wow.
that's it was really complicated just to price everything out. I mean, it was a huge investment that we would have to make, to get a return that we didn't know. To launch into a new market is very tricky, especially with delivery, because you're already, especially in this time, you're already competing against so many other companies. It doesn't take much for a student to start a delivery company, but it takes a lot for them to start a good delivery company. Um, I would say, around the time I started Unihop, all of these GoPuff clones were coming out. I mean, I think there's like 5 or 6 now that are in existence. I think 2 of them are gone. I think one of them is trying to get acquired. It's a tough market. Um,
Yeah.
so, to keep food in your dorm and delivered to people isn't, the it's not really the cure to cancer, but it's
Yeah.
it's certainly something that people like short term. It's just, can you expand that? A, can you expand that operationally? Two, can you expand it without facing competitors? You can't really make an argument saying that other company that operates 2 dorms down is worse than me. Why are they worse than you? It's the same people servicing the same people with the same products. Unless you're taking more risk, they're arguably less stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So I guess to expand upon that a little bit, did you have it like uh were you afraid to kind of like did you think that you were going to have success at other schools like with the same type of that they would have the same problem and obviously you were kind of pivoting your approach, it sounded like, to like a B2E selling to the universities. So, even before your B2B pivot, can you kind of break down this like B2E pivot? Now the parents complaining, whatever, that whole
Right.
kind of
So B2E
transition.
was very short-lived, unfortunately. I tried with my university. They gave little to no interest. Then when they saw growth, they gave little interest, very misleading interest, I will say. Um, they didn't entertain it much. They were looking at bigger providers, giving them more of a kickback. You
Mm.
know, everyone likes to make money. You can never you can never be too nonprofit.
You're
Um,
talking about like when you say bigger providers, you're talking about like Instacart, like the kind
Yeah,
of
like
just big.
partnering with like a bigger provider because there's more they can do. It's also less institutional risk. So that was one piece. The second the other educational piece was the same thing going back to the point I just made of let's say I'm expanding to 10 schools. And let's say the 11th school, that's my prime market, a student there creates a Unihop. Well, who do you think the school is going to want to partner with? Me or that student who started it at their university who's essentially doing the same thing? Probably them. So one part was like, do I want to start expanding this to other universities and take the risk of like, the market's not as big as I thought it was? Or do I really want the operations here to be great and expand, you know, from my university, surrounding area, surrounding states, etc. So was it more of like a radial expansion or like a get a bunch of hubs? Radial was what I went with. The first, and this was actually a great sort of forced learning, was when Unihop first started, our customers were freshmen. Freshmen don't have cars. They all lived on campus. But the next year, they weren't all on campus. So now I was like, huh, I have to deliver off campus. Our radius just got increased by, 5, 10 miles. This is a whole new problem. So I sort of grew with my customers and was forced to grow by my customers. It was like, hey, we were doing delivery on foot. Well, what are we going to do now? Are we going to have cars? Are we going to have electric bikes? What is sort of the next look? What about when students live 25 miles away? Can we still service them? I want to, but can we? So it was a lot of like being forced into situations and having to not back down and force innovation.
And how at that point, how are you like what's the scale? But how are you dealing with kind of the drivers and like the logistics? Like that the radial thing I think is a good point. Like how do you kind of adapt what before was a relatively kind of unilateral, I guess,
Yeah,
operation into something more, you
I,
know,
I got no, I bought an electric bike.
that you guys
I
are able to all 50 states or something like that.
I would say like
So
short term, I bought an electric bike. Like that was the expansion of like, huh, I can't walk anymore, but I can ride, pretty fast. Let's try it. And then, a couple of my friends got electric scooters and electric, this and that. So that was sort of the first expansion. And then it got to the point of like, it's raining. I can't ride my bike. What am I going to do? So then I, put umbrellas on the bike. But in more seriousness, we started looking third party. So we started working with other local couriers who were already doing delivery, and saying like, hey, can we send volume over to you? And I said, of course, you can send volume. But then we had to look at some more, domestic partners, as we started getting really big and expanding outside of Florida, expanding outside of, the Southeast, getting into just the whole US. Then we started having orders coming in from like Hawaii and Alaska. And I was like, whoa, it's like a whole other world. So that was, and a lot of it was just forced expansion of like, I have a problem. What do I do?
um okay, interesting. So like just so couriers, those are those businesses or people, or is that like a platform? So I'm just curious, like
Platforms. So working with, there were a bunch of like small fleet couriers. Say that again.
yeah, like give me an example. Just so, I'm doing it in case
Oh,
anybody is like,
a very easy example, Uber. Uber would be a courier. Um, but like smaller term, I mean, there's a bunch of them. There are some that are, it's really just a group of guys and they have insurance and they deliver. I
okay,
started
cool.
having like fleets of like box trucks and you'd never like Now I'm running like a trucking company. We had a lot of people requesting to get help with moving. So like, hey, can you help my daughter move from one apartment to the other? So then I started finding like local couriers with box trucks and like cargo vans and having that whole fleet sort of built out. And I wasn't running any of it. I was sending them an order, giving them, as strict rules as I could. But a lot of that point was trust. So it's, do I trust the people? Do I know the people that are doing it? And that's one of the hardest things of expanding a company is you're going to lose that no matter what. You can't get
Sure.
so big where like the CEO of Uber doesn't know, John Smith delivering in Virginia. But he has
Sure.
to trust that his system is good. He has to trust that his system is good when things fail. And that, he has a good verification process of knowing that drivers are going to do what they're supposed to do. And that's a lot of what I faced was, can I trust these people? Can I trust that my operations are good? And that was something that I worked, 3+ years on creating, 2+ years.
Nice. Okay, cool. So, look, once so you were saying obviously the B2E kind of approach was short-lived. Can you walk me through that a little more with like a little more details for somebody who might be like trying to sell into higher ed? Like, how hard is it to deal with administrators at other schools? And just
It's
like
very
that kind of,
slow. B2E is very slow because they have a huge liability. They have a huge, you know, requirement to serve their community the best. So it's a lot
sure,
of due diligence. It's a lot of, can we find someone else who can do it for cheaper? Can we find someone else who can do it, who's been doing it for longer? There's so many questions that they ask that you're not always going to be the best fit. So it's really about how can you make it a good fit. A lot of it is also just based on a university that has a very strong entrepreneurship driven or a very strong admin who is, involved in entrepreneurship is a big thing. At a school like USC, you can, move a lot faster, versus a school like, I mean, I don't want to say any school is bad, but a random school in the middle of nowhere, they're probably not going to be as quick to move because they just don't need it as badly.
got it.
So it's very complicated. You need to be very professional. Don't try to sell when you're just starting. You need to have traction. You need to say, this is my operation. This is what we're doing. This is the insurance you want. This is the insurance we have. Don't do anything for the first time because of that institution. If an institution says you need $1 million of insurance, don't go out and get
So,
it.
yeah, yeah,
If you don't already have it, you're not at the right time. You need to talk to them when you're at that point to meet. Don't say, we have a great idea, we'd love to work with you. They don't, an institution's not here for ideas. They're here for an immediate fix that's going to actually solve a problem. And that was something that I
sure.
didn't know. And I tried to do that and I was, somewhat dumb for doing it, but also just somewhat naive. So
Yeah,
that
just
was
don't.
that was one thing that was, a learning point.
Yeah, that lines up, I guess, in my experience, having done like a ed tech company with it, which is it's a long process, but it differs school to school. But probably the best indicator is that they're, passionate about startups or like they have that type of infrastructure, whoever the administrator is, because then they're more open to hearing your pitch, and
Right.
whatnot.
And
So
also
I guess
don't
walk.
ever try to compete against a provider and say, oh, you're working with this company, we're better.
Yeah, yeah.
They're not going to switch.
Right.
Unless you're going to save them like $1 billion a year, they're not going to switch because, it's a lot harder to change than it is to just keep things the way they are.
So I guess would you say it's better to be like pitch yourself as an addition versus like a replacement for something like something they could just add kind of without hassle as opposed
I
to
don't even know if addition is enough. I think you need to be like a game changing product. You need to do something that when the dean leaves, he can be like, this was my decision. I did
got,
that. Not, you know, it needs to be something they're gonna be proud of.
got it. I mean, in that process, did you ever try to like use the parents or like did you try to because one way that I've had like clients do that are ed tech companies, usually more like a SaaS type deal, but is they get user adoption from like the students or the parents or teacher, professors or something, and then they try to sell to administrators or like get buy-in from the administrators. Is that something that you ever
We tried.
kind of?
That was something, we first talked and said, I have an idea, and they said, forget it. And then we came back and said, I have, tons of proof. And
Nice.
I guess their thought is, let's say you're a sophomore, in 2 years you're gone. So they don't have to worry about you again. So if they can just
Yeah.
kind of keep ignoring you for 2 years, then um, you know, that suits them best. But to say that won't work for, a SaaS, I have no idea. Blackboard started somewhere, Canva started somewhere. So all these companies, did it and it worked.
Somehow.
But it
That's
unfortunately,
for
it all
another
comes down to
podcast. That's a story for another podcast.
it comes down to money. It comes down to, how much does it cost? How much is the school going to save? How much are they going to make? What are the unit economics look like?
Got it. So how, take me through the actual like specifics, the final pivot, I guess, that you made to today's kind of form of Unihop. Like when did you make that decision? How did that go? Like what was actually going on to bring you in that B2B direction?
So a big part was there's actually a competitor conversation I had. They were doing what we're doing now, but on a much different scope. And I had a talk with him, and he said, um, yeah, we were gonna do B2C, but it's just really expensive to sell. And I was like, you know what? I haven't had anyone tell me that. I've always thought that, and I've been scared of it, but I've never actually heard it from someone else. So that was sort of like a wake-up call of, you know, it's got a good point. There's no point of running two different delivery services. Let's just really focus down on one. So that was a big flip and a big heads up. Sometimes you have to hear it, and you have to hear what you don't want to hear to finally make sense to you. Um,
Okay.
I didn't want to change. I was always someone who liked to add, but I didn't really like to pivot because I thought, if things were going well, why do you have to change it? Um, but another piece was, if things are going well, how much longer are they going to go well? And when are you going to hit that point of, I'm just kind of plateauing, or I'm, not really growing? So fortunately, it was a pretty easy pivot. It wasn't even really a pivot. It was more like a veer of like, we're kind of already doing this, but let's just start, our sales in a different direction. So it was a fairly easy pivot, but it was a
Yeah.
very hard, it was a very scary pivot of like, how do you go back?
And a very difficult decision to restructure the ATN operation internationally has been taken in order to protect the future of the business. This action was only taken after seriously.
Okay, Mr. Potter. No, wait. What? I don't need 24 hours. I don't have to talk to anybody. I know right now. The answer is no, no.
And I guess like, so what are you actually changing with that business pivot? Obviously the website, it basically changes your target audience. Like, so what are, like, after you make the decision, like what are like the immediate next steps?
Well,
Like how are you changing?
email campaigns drop like crazy. We don't really have to advertise to people anymore. We're advertising to businesses, so it's a very different type of email. It's a lot of cold calls and referrals, but on a different magnitude. We were never calling customers saying, hey, do you need groceries delivered? Like we never had that, but it was a very different focus of like, when you run a e-commerce type website, you're always focused on funnel. You're focused on how many people are going on your website, how many people are converting, how many people are returning. What does that look like? Versus B2B, you're not really tracking sales as much. You're more so tracking, how many businesses can you bring on? How big are these businesses? Um, you know, what do their customers look like? How much money are you making off of each business? It's not so much of like, John's using us for Walgreens and for Publix and for Best Buy. let's sell him on other stores. It's you're using our delivery. Let's get you to use our catering delivery and our large transport. But it doesn't really make sense for like, if we're going to work with a cookie shop, they're never going to need a box truck. It's, you really can't upsell them. It's, once you get them, you got them. But it's a different type of sale.
Got it. Got it. So it's not as much of an event-based thing. You're like trying to get them as a long-term customer.
Right.
Somebody that's kind of like bought into it. So is the sales pitch kind of more focused around like the brand and sort of the maybe the makeup of the team, or like what your ethos is, or is it focused on like the pitch? Because you brought up kind of like the whole like delivery logistics thing, like we're a better product. So what is kind of the sales pitch like if you're sending an email to a cold business,
It's similar. So it's we're going to do something that you can't do. So like if you're a small team and you're delivering by yourself, I get that. I was doing the same thing a couple of years ago. I get that you can't grow your business if you're delivering by yourself. And I understand that you don't want to just throw your orders to a third party. Let us actively manage your orders. We get this. We've been doing it for years. Let us, be your fractional delivery logistics planner. Let us take the reins and do everything for you. And there's a lot of companies who were either, delivering by themselves. They were working with companies like Uber or DoorDash and were getting destroyed off of, fees, or they were having so many issues that they couldn't delegate their time to focus on issues, grow their business, and actually run operations. So we could come in and say, is this a pain point for you? They're going to be like, no. Is this a pain point for you? No. Is that third one a pain point for you? Yes, it is. I need help, and we can help. And a lot of it was, we don't have to have 3 products. We have 1 product, but 3 problems our product is solving.
Nice. Okay. So your original business enabled you, I guess, to discover what like the larger problem was, or what the more pertinent problem
It was R&D.
So how are you dealing with so now that you're in this B2B space, what are the kind of challenges now? Like, is pricing an issue, or the pricing model, retention? Like, what are
pricing model is it's harder in smaller cities where costs are lower. I've noticed pricing to be something where some businesses, they've been doing delivery themselves, and to now say they have a cost is scary to them. To say like, you have to pay us $15 for that delivery, they're gonna be like, well, I was paying 0 before, that's a lot. Versus a business who has already been doing delivery for years, and now you're telling them that the price are going to increase by 10%. When they're not paying the delivery, they don't really care. They're like, oh, sure, 10 is $1, I don't care. But for a business that's super high volume, like a restaurant, if we were to go after like Panera, which we would never work with Panera, but let's say we worked after Panera, they would say, you're increasing our cost by 90 cents. 90 cents times 20,000 deliveries is, a ton of money. We can't do that. So that was sort of another forced learn of, let's not go after businesses with high, crazy volume. Let's go after businesses with consistent volume, but really small businesses. Like, they understand that this delivery is hard, and they understand that doing delivery themselves is not expandable.
Got it. Okay, so I get that. So I get how you kind of are carving out the niche, so to speak, and you've kind of narrowed it down to, okay, what are the small businesses, etc. They don't have the same quantity demands. How are you dealing with like the territories, like from a sales, you know what I'm saying, perspective? Obviously, because
big cities are great. Big cities get the most referrals. Lots of businesses talk. There's also just more people, more volume. So even the small businesses are doing more volume than small businesses in smaller cities. Another part is doing delivery in small cities, kind of a double-edged sword. Small cities are even easier to onboard because there's typically low infrastructure of delivery. So if we can offer delivery there, we're typically one of a couple other providers. At the same time, smaller cities, smaller volume, but you have to find a mix. So we work with a couple of businesses that have 5 locations, and 4 of their locations are in big cities. 1 of them are in small. So to ignore small businesses is a risk of like, do they have other relationships with bigger businesses in bigger cities?
Gotcha.
And that was one thing of like, we started working with a business that was doing like 5 deliveries a month, like nothing. And then they're like, oh, I run a side business in another state and we do 50 deliveries a day. Hello, great to meet you. Let's talk. So that was you know, you don't want to say no to everyone, but you also don't want to, look for that golden, ticket everywhere. So to say, I've got it down and I know exactly what markets to go for, I'm always learning and there's always, surprises. But I would say understanding where you're best at and where your margins are best at. Like our margins are best at big cities that are not too condensed. Like New York is crazy complicated.
Sure.
Manhattan, it takes 25 minutes to drive a mile. Versus a city like Miami is, aside from rush hour, is pretty good. Good margins, pretty
Price goes
consistent.
up.
Exactly, exactly.
But okay, cool. So I guess, I mean, do you have any like what do you have any intentions, I guess, to develop that into a two-sided marketplace? You know what I'm saying? Or like and reintroduce the B2C side, or do you really see it as this is B2B only for the long run?
Strictly B2B, I would say releasing a B2C product would be something I'm, somewhat considering or even exploring in the future. It
Sure.
wouldn't be like an Instacart where people are shopping. It's more of a, something regular people can leverage, probably more so in the moving transport space because there's a lot of I think there's a high demand there, especially for um, you know, pick up my couch and bring it. I'm buying something on Facebook, I need help. But that's a very hard marketplace. The margins are good, but it's hard. Um,
Yep.
so I think it needs more exploration. I'd like to see sort of where demand goes over the next year or so. But
Gotcha.
I'm not saying I wouldn't re-enter it. It's just not something that I'd want to, redevelop in the same way.
Do you run into too many direct competitors with the B2B model, or ones that you follow or are concerned about, or just monitoring in any sense?
Everyone's a competitor in delivery. At the end of the day, it's people picking up and dropping off. But
Yep.
it's about the service you offer. It's about the additional perks. So are you a delivery company that's just delivering? Are you a delivery person that has, really good customer support? Are you a delivery company that has, that provides analytics or even billing infrastructure? What does that all look like? So I would say delivery has turned into sort of like a Stripe where you can't just process credit cards, you have to do more. Stripe competes against Square and PayPal, but they're all different. And someone's going to go to PayPal versus Square because of a number of different reasons. So you have to do more than just your main product.
Got it. Um, Another question, kind of totally different. One of the things we talked about originally was, hiring people versus freelancers. Do you want to talk a little bit about like kind of how you set up your team, just internally?
Hiring is very hard. It's typically something that you need capital for, like a significant capital. It's not typically something where you can, get away. And I don't like the whole free, internship type thing. I tried it, but that was sort of my realization of like, you get what you pay for. So a lot of it was automation. So if I needed help with customer support, I found ways to automate it, whether it was AI or whether it was just like a different type of user interface. Another issue I ran into was like over scheduling. I had too many people changing deliveries even when they were on their way. So it was just sort of fine tuning ways of like get rid of the ability to do that or add in more flexibility to change or like updates. There's ways to solve things and to speak pretty vague. But there's, people do tasks, people do actions. So the more ways you can automate that to reduce unnecessary positions, like a great example would be, do we need someone to, call stores to check like the status of an order? We could, but we could also just have something automated that calls the store, asks a question, gets a response, and then prints that response. And if action is needed, then a person steps in. So that was, sort of one thing. Sales, you can always outsource. You can always outsource customer support. You can always outsource even marketing. You can outsource it. A lot of AI tools or even, marketing firms will do it. A lot of them will do it for pretty cheap if you're smaller, because they want to grow with you. So it really depends on what you're looking for. If you want to outsource, what's something you can't outsource? Like if you want to outsource, like if you're running like a yoga class, you really can't outsource the yoga instructor, because that's like your whole business. But
Sure.
there are always things you can outsource or things you can automate, and I think hiring to solve problems runs into more problems.
Nice. Cool. Yeah, I agree with that largely. I guess another topic would be, starting a company. I think a distract, I can tell, right? You're very kind of functional in the way that you're thinking about the business. How have you thought about like advisors and mentors and investment and that type of thing? Has it been sort of something that you would consider beneficial to you, or not to pursue?
I'm not to pursue. I would say it depends on the business, depends on, your bandwidth. For me, I was always very operational heavy. So fundraising is a full-time job. It was nearly impossible for me to dedicate the time I needed.
Right.
In terms of advisors, I would say there are advisors who want to help. There are advisors who just like to know stuff. So they say like, keep me updated, but they don't actually help. They just want you to tell them stuff. And then there are also advisors who have their own benefit. I have a guy who still emails me and says, "Hey, how's Unihop going? Want to find a time to chat?" What I realize is what he just was trying to find the right time to fundraise, and he wanted to help me fundraise. And I was like, you know what? Forget it. I have no interest in talking to you. So understanding intentions are really important. I would say, I think a big myth is people always say, more conversation you have, the better. I think that's very false. It depends on the conversations you're having. If you're having an hour and a half conversation with someone who doesn't know anything and who just likes to talk, that could have been a
A lot of
15-minute conversation and you could have got just as much out of it. So
Yeah.
it totally depends. And I would say be very skeptical of everything and always ask questions to yourself, because the biggest mistake you can make is wasting your time.
Nice. Okay. I guess, just like from this whole experience, are there any kind of like two or three just like big things that you would have in mind for somebody who's kind of like following a similar path to you, like that you wouldn't have known prior to undertaking,
Um,
starting it?
you have to identify the difference between burnout and just a hard time. Like starting a business is anything but easy. If you're burning out every 2 weeks, every time you make a new pivot, you're either you're either not fixing a problem and you're trying to like force a solution on a problem that doesn't exist, or maybe you're just not cut out for it.
Yeah.
I don't, and that's another thing I don't like the word entrepreneur, is because I don't want to say like I'm immune to burnout or I'm immune to hardship. Like there are times where I'm like, I'm done. Like I'm done for the day. I got to take a break. So I'm certainly not someone who's immune to anything. It is a tolerance thing of how much can you take. But I would always recommend to identify how much you can do and understand your bandwidth. And that's one of the most important things, of understanding yourself and really knowing who you are and what you want to get out of it before you tackle and force yourself into situations that you just can't handle.
Nice. Cool. Thanks, Kyle, for coming and talking. I think this was super helpful. And where can people kind of find you, or if they want to talk to you, what's the best way to keep up to date with Unihop and everything you're doing?
Well, I mean, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. I would say, the best way to talk to me is start a business that needs help with delivery. And
Yeah,
I'll reach right out. But I'm
or that's a better question. What kind of businesses, like what are some, give, what if people have businesses existing?
Yeah,
like,
I mean, open a flower shop, open a furniture store, open a cupcake shop. Um, that's probably the best way. I prioritize in order of importance. So like if I have things that I need to get on, I'm gonna get on them right away. If there are
Sure.
things of less importance, I'm very, ladder focused.
Gotcha.
But it totally depends, and I'm not gonna shut someone out because they want to talk. But just like I said, I'm not gonna have a conversation, for shits and giggles.
Sounds good. Kyle, thanks.
Thank you, Chris.
Sometimes we cry, sometimes we let it out. Sometimes we laugh, oh yeah, we work it out. But when we fight, I'll break you down. Bloodshot eyes, forgive my temper now.